2.
Hey, Lynz, what are you listening to?
Brian, you share yours and I'll share mine.
With millions of podcasts, how do you choose?
We are here to help you find that next bingeable podcast.
Or that piece of content you'll follow regularly.
You're listening to Feed Drops. All right, everybody, welcome to Feed Drops. We are happy to have you here, and this is our 9th episode. This is the last of the single digits, and Brian, my pal Brian here with me, is my co-host. How are you feeling about that, Brian?
You know, it's strange on two fronts. This is our 9th episode of Feed Drops, but then we also do just the drops, which, let's keep it real, it's not a lot of podcasting in our part. We do a little intro and a little outro, tying it back to Feed Drops, and we play the episodes in their entirety. So if you like what you're hearing, check out just the drops and find that episode you want to hear all of, and or go to that podcast, subscribe to that podcast. Let them know I'm here because I heard your show on Feed Drops.
Yeah, and you can also join in the fun on Twitter. It's been really fun this past week where both of the shows that we featured this week were submitted shows, and they were really active in the Twitter conversation and on Instagram. So, definitely just come and chat us up over there too if you're at all enjoying this.
And, before we move on, I think I need to say this. Lynz, thanks for being here again. It's awesome working with you. I appreciate working with you. I appreciate you and what you bring to the table. And I feel that the success of this show is greatly on your shoulders, man. You rock.
That is very nice of you to say. And you play an excellent host every week. In the physical way, having the building really helps everything move along, and your tireless work ethic certainly keeps this thing from falling off the rails. So that's been our love fest for the episode.
And you know what? I'm having so much fun doing this show still.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a blast.
It is. And I can't wait till we're past that episode 13 stigma hump. And next thing we know, we're going to blink and we're going to be at episode 30, man.
Yeah, no, I think that's, it already feels like these first few have flown by. And so I'm really interested to hear what we brought to the table this week. And what did you bring to the table?
I brought to the table Bound by the Cloak. And this was a submitted show. And I just finished a recording session, as you're well aware. And I was scrolling through Instagram, and I'm looking for, because I did a screenshot. Good Pods, they send you emails on occasion letting you know where your show is ranked on their platform. Bound by the Cloak is number 4 in the top 100 of indie social sciences chart, number 8 in the top 100 of the social sciences chart, and number 9 in the top 100 of indie science chart. And that just came across today. So I'm like, wow, I picked a good one.
Yeah, you picked a good one. That's going to be fun. I can't wait to dig into it.
And you brought to the table.
I brought a show called Hack My Business.
Okay.
And it's produced by my pal, Christina Barcy, who we featured on a previous episode. But it's got a couple of great co-hosts on here. It's a business show, and they talk about risk analysis, and we'll dig into more of that. But great for anybody who's any kind of business owner, business manager kind of person.
That sounds like a show I would normally subscribe to. So I'm excited to hear what clips you're going to be sharing with me along with the audience.
Yeah, this one's going to be a good one.
Awesome. We're going to get right back to that after a quick break. All right, we are back, and Lynz has brought to us a great show called Hack My Business. And Lynz, do you want to tee this up? Or are you ready for clip number 1?
Well, I'll just say for this clip number 1, there are 2. There's a host, Jesse Torres, and a co-host named Sid. And so this first one is sort of the beginning of the show, kind of the co-host banter discussion part, but it really resonated with me.
Here we go.
I don't feel like it's coming in together in the same week, but it is in the last kind of at least the last month. And I always think that there's this bizarre thing about when it rains and pours. It was the same thing when I was single, where like, you know, like I'd be living in the desert for like, you know, years, let's be honest. And then all of a sudden, like, oh my gosh, like how did my game just improve like tremendously all at once? And it's the same thing I feel like here in the world of business.
You know what's funny about that? It's always the same. It's the same principle when you're not looking for it.
Yeah, I would say the not looking for it bit is pretty important there, right? Like if you're, if you're too thirsty in the business sense or in a personal dating sense, you know, it kind of has that a little bit of yuck to it to other people. And so this quote definitely reminded me that you have to kind of stick with things that sometimes you're in a dry spell and, it may be the only thing gets you out of that's time.
You know, I really like that quote. It goes on to say, when you're not looking for it, it just comes. And just to reiterate what you said, I've had that happen to me. It's like some days I hit the sales pipeline so hard and I'm just hustling, trying to get new customers, trying to bring customers back on board. And it's just nothing. And you get, you start like, oh, what am I doing wrong? Do I need to reevaluate what I'm doing? And then you're just like, you know what? I'm just going to step back, take a break, take a deep breath, focus my time and energy somewhere else. And then boof, next thing you know, you're trying to figure out how to get out of a double and triple booking situation.
Yeah. No, that's so common that you do sort of abandon ship and look another direction, and you fill your plate so fast that it comes back to bite you.
Yes, it does.
It sure does.
Yes, it does.
Well, the rest of the show, their guest for the show is a man named Alex Sanfilippo, and this next quote he is a part of. So let's jump into that.
All right.
Identifying it, I actually realized that the best type of employee that I ever had was the creative mind, but that wanted the structure of a big organization to work within. So maybe not like overly ambitious. And again, this is just the type of person that I found they worked really well. Some of them are the ones that they climbed the ladder a lot faster because one, they were creative, but not so much so that they're like, I can't wait to get out of here. Like they enjoyed the structure of it and us kind of putting them, for lack of a better term, in the box and letting them kind of play in that box.
Yeah, that's such an interesting thing, because I am a creative person who has not always enjoyed structure. And so I find that there have been times when I have been difficult to manage because of this. And so I put myself now as a business owner into the shoes of the person who had to manage me. And I go, oh man, what a poor soul.
You know, I hate to say I'm not a creative person, because I am when it comes to audio and podcasting, I think, but it's been learned. It's that it doesn't just come to me. I've worked hard. I've studied. I've read a lot. I've opened up those creative brain waves in my head. And I think I do a decent job. Are there people more creative than me? Yes. But I come from a very structured background, from a young child being raised in a very religious home, to scouting, to the Young Marines, to the Marine Corps, to after the Corps, getting involved in paramilitary style jobs, security, EMS. And now I find myself in my late 50s or early 50s. And I'm having to manage people much younger than me that are creative. And some days I just scratch my head, because it's not unlike me to go, just get it done, and I can't speak to the workforce in the manner in which I've been accustomed to speaking. So it was very refreshing hearing that clip and hearing, pieces of this show. It seems like this show dealt a lot with managing and hiring. So I am going to go back and listen to this show in its entirety when we drop it on Just the Drops, because that is something I struggle with. Even some of my show hosts, the ones that are former military, it's like I can speak to in a different manner, but it's comfortable to me. And then other hosts, I don't have that relationship, or we do not have that familiarity of the military in our background, and I can't speak to that way. So it's like I'm wearing two hats.
Yeah, and I think, I think when we're not really thinking too hard about it, we tend to think that everybody thinks like we do. And I think sort of what this speaks to is that there's a big variety in sort of how people deal with things and how they address, some people are very creative but pretty unstructured, or they might have a different framework in their head for how things are structured, and that's not in your military framework, but it doesn't mean you couldn't find a path to work together. But I think it does require us all to kind of take a beat and go, okay, what is it they need from me to get their best work? And that sort of thinking in service of others is, I think, really good for running a business, and it emboldens people to step up on your behalf.
And one thing, I am passionate about leadership, and I'm not being boastful. I feel I'm wise enough to listen to every idea before decisions are made, because my way is a way, but it's not the only way, and it may not be the best way. And I think, again, I'm wise enough to understand that and collect and consider as much data as possible.
Yeah, I like to say my way is the best way I thought of, but and I've probably thought it through from a lot of angles in my own head, but without the input of others, it's an untested idea.
Yeah.
So, Hack My Business, I think, has been interesting. It was, for us as business owners, it's talking about stuff we care about. The risk analysis piece, I used to do events, and we would have to analyze all the ways something could kind of go off the rails. And this show kind of seems to have that sort of desire to, like, with eyes wide open, let's look at all that could go wrong and try to mitigate what we can. And I found it enjoyable, and I think other people will too.
And you know what? Just off the cuff, I've actually already recommended it to one of my hosts. It was that good. And this is a show up his alley. I think he would dig it. I think he would.
Yeah. So definitely go check out the show. Definitely tune in to Just the Drops so you can hear the full episode. And we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back.
And when we come back, we're going to talk about sex.
Ooh, girl.
All right, we are back. And my offering this week is Bound by the Cloak. And earlier I talked about their standings on Good Pods. And this show is hosted by Zoey and Chandi. Now, Chandi, if I'm mispronouncing your name, because I want to say Candy, but it's Chandi, and the all-wise internet told me it was pronounced Chandi. So hopefully I'm getting that right. But you guys are sharing stories that are seldom heard. And this episode, which is your episode number 6, is entitled The Grande Horizontale. And you actually took to the internet and found a sex worker and interviewed her. And obviously this kind of intrigued me a little bit. My wife and I have had discussions of, why is prostitution even illegal? It's somewhat of a victimless crime. And when I say somewhat, there's always the bad element in any job. But it was like, wow, I don't think I've ever listened to a show or watched a TV show that's actually interviewing a sex worker. So it was kind of intriguing out of the gate. And, with this full episode, you get into some of the advocacy, and you get into some of the laws supporting it in an organized licensure kind of way, and laws that were actually written to discourage and prohibit. So it was a very well-rounded episode. And again, this is Bound by the Cloak. Now, you got to listen to a few of the clips when we were prepping for this show. What are your initial thoughts of?
Well, it kind of takes me back to college. I studied at UC Santa Cruz, a very social sciencey kind of place, and I had a social sciencey kind of major, and definitely had classes where we discussed sort of the gender, sexuality, sex work, and all these kind of fringe, for at least for American culture, kind of fringe things and sort of their things. And so in a way, I could hear it in their language. It kind of rung pretty familiar to me. But, I haven't spent a lot of time digging into the specific experiences of sex workers. So I'm intrigued to know more.
I was just amazed that they could find a sex worker on the internet.
I know. There's so few.
Who would have thought?
Yeah. I thought there were only fans.
Only fans. Here we go with clip number 1 of Grande Horizontale from Zoey and Chandi on the podcast Beyond the Cloak.
We wanted to talk about sex work, so we found a sex worker or escort to talk to. So we dug deep on the internet looking for somebody to talk to about sex work, and we found Maggie McNeil. She is a semi-retired sex worker. She's an author and an activist.
Right off the bat, author, activist, semi-retired. I'm like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's like part of me wants to have fun with this, but then part of me is like, well, this is how this person's earned a living and contributed to society and made a better life for herself. So,
yeah, it's like the balance of serious versus playful here. Because I think, the tone we certainly want to strike is that we are taking it seriously as a creative work, and we're reading it in the manner that it is meant for. And it's also tackling a topic that's a little bit, difficult or salacious. And so, kind of makes us laugh a little bit too. And I hope the creators know that, anything we do with this while listening, it's because we were inspired to listen in the first place and because we wanted to share even more. So any fun we have, it is not at your expense.
By no means.
Laughing with you, not at you.
I once heard that people will make jest of things they're uncomfortable talking about. So maybe that's where I'm coming from. Here we
Noted.
Go. Clip number 2, noted.
And something had to give. So in autumn of 97, I started stripping, did that for 2 years. Didn't particularly like it. I was not a particularly good stripper. And it was just too much work. It was just too much being up there all night long, just too difficult for me. And so I find like I'm just really much better. A friend of mine, Mistress Matisse, has an expression. She says, I'm better in the room. Yeah, I agree. I'm like that too. That's why I don't do porn. I don't do phone sex. I'm much better face to face in the room, one-on-one. That's where I work.
When I listened to this clip, I first, I guess I don't look at dancers as in the sex trade. I don't know if I'm naive about that or if there is a distinction. And then the phone sex trade, I never really thought about that as sex work because it's just talk. But her realizing that these avenues weren't for her and this avenue was for her is, any entrepreneur's journey and discovery at the end of that. And her realizing what she felt was the best fit for her life and lifestyle, is commendable.
Yeah. Well, I think what it made me think of was that in every field, there are specialists, right? There are generalists and there are specialists. Mm-hmm. And so I hadn't really thought maybe in that field what the different specialists might be, but there are people who are better at it in person versus being a performer through a lens of a camera or in other ways. And so, in my quest to make everything sort of work back to a business kind of touch thing, I can kind of see like this is one specialist who found their way in a niche, shall we say, of that world. And so, but like you say, there are all these different ways it shows up. I think they all have some amount of stigma, right? Even if you were at a party and you were like, yes, I am a phone sex operator. That's like still like polite society might still be uncomfortable with that, And so even if you're not really crossing a line.
I think I'm going to try that at my next networking event when somebody asks me what I do.
Well, I have a friend who used to do that, and I have always trying to convince her to do a podcast because she's used to using her voice to get people to feel things.
Right.
And it's like, that is a great crossover opportunity. So calling all phone sex workers, it is time to start a podcast.
You said using your voice to touch things.
To make people feel things.
All righty. We have one more clip from this episode of Beyond the Cloak. Here we go.
You have to know that you are worth paying for and demand to be paid. I mean, that's where you have to be. You can't be in a position of, oh, do you think so? No. You have to be like, yeah, well, baby, if you want to be with me, it's going to be this much.
So you really have to take control.
Yeah, you have to. That's why it's so peculiar. So peculiar. The trafficking rhetoric is so strange because if you look at negative things people have said about whores throughout history, that we're weak and victims is not there. Not there. I mean, if you look at the Bible or at, moralistic people from the Middle Ages and things like that, the negatives about sex work is always that, oh, they're bold, they don't know their place, they're uppity, it's all this kind of stuff, right? It's basically, we're not wife material.
That when I was listening to this, I thought back to movies, mainly Westerns, where the sex trade was, in the saloon, right? And yeah, they were a little bold and controlling, but this kind of like made sense of that for me.
Yeah, and I think that they really like went through a few kind of big meaty topics in that quote, and so it really, kind of pulls it out of the pun joke zone and go like, wow, okay, there is a lot to evaluate and consider in these worlds. And, and I know the show goes on to talk about some of the legalization and non-legalization. And I can see why, that it's a complicated thing in a society where we're trying to, some people are trying to tell people how to live. Other people are trying to give people the space to live the way they want to live.
Right.
Right.
It's, at the end of the day, it was an eye-opening episode to be listened to by me. I can only approach this from the way I was raised and, my morality. But again, the discussions I've had with the wife and discussions I've had with friends, and it's like, I just don't see the harm in it. I understand that where it is legal, there's constant testing and licensure, and it's in a controlled environment, and it's made as safe as it can be. And I just don't see the harm in that. I really don't. And that's my personal opinion, not the opinion of GPN, Sitch Radio. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth.
Yeah. No, I think I'm pretty close to that as well. And it's certainly an area where a lot of people don't want to look at all. And I think at the very least, it deserves to be looked at with eyes wide open and an open mind,
Most definitely. And, shout out to Zoey and Chandi here. Good episode. And the whole, I think I need to kind of run through their lineup and maybe listen to a few more episodes, because the whole social sciences, a friend and I, we often have these heated discussions about social science aspects. And, I never really thought about even looking for a podcast like this that brings shows or topics, conversations to the forefront that usually aren't discussed. So I'm kind of hooked.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love that. That we could have a discussion, that we could, go down the rabbit hole, and that it was informed. I think that's what I really liked about this, is they found somebody who was eloquent, who's really thoughtful, and put that together so that there was something to really think about.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's all I've got. You've got any parting words here today?
Nope. I think the parting words are that if you want your show on Feed Drops, then you should definitely check out feeddrops.com and click the button at the top to submit your show. We definitely are checking the submissions and picking from them, as well as promoting the shows that get on here. And it's been a lot of fun to get to know the creators through their social media and through all that when we've been featuring them on the show.
Yeah, and listen, please do not get all butthurt if we haven't talked about your show yet. We have had a flood of submissions, and we only cover 2 a week. We intend to get to more shows. Unfortunately, everything submitted probably isn't going to make the cut to be on the show. It's nothing against you or your show. It may be some creative direction that we want to go, or a series of shows we want to highlight. But it's not to say you can't submit a new episode at a later date.
Yeah, we definitely want to be in touch and keep tabs on everyone who does submit, and be able to encourage you to keep doing your great work. The only way this works is if there are a lot of great podcasts out there, and thankfully there are.
This show has really opened my eyes to the number of shows. I think I first discussed this in an earlier episode. It's like when I open up the podcast app, I want to consume information that is going to help me become a better business person, communicator, boss, husband, father. And like this show, for example, was just a wild ride. And it's just, wow, mind blowing. And I think I'm learning to relax and consume podcasts for entertainment.
Yeah. Well, there's a growth that comes from feeling entertained and filled up in that way too. And so glad you're finding it.
Well, I hope we're helping others find that as well through this show. If you like what we're doing, give us a follow, give us a rating, hit that 5-star, leave a few kind words. To be honest with you, more importantly, I'd rather you come over to Twitter, follow us, and engage with us there. I'd rather socialize with you than see 5 stars on some podcast app. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, we'll take proof of life any direction we can find it. But, in those places where there are a lot of people chatting is a lot of fun, because then it feels like we're a part of something bigger than ourselves. And we're a part of a big podcasting community that is really supportive. And so we thank all you podcasters for being in this community with us. Thank you, Brian, for being my awesome co-host. And I think that's about it.
Well, hit us up in those social links in the show notes below. We'd love to engage with you there.